Well, welcome to It's an Inside Job Bite-Sized Fridays, your weekly dose of resilience, optimism, and well-being to get you ready for the weekend. Now, each week, I'll bring you insightful tips and uplifting stories to help you navigate life's challenges and embrace a more positive mindset. And so with that said, let's slip into the stream. Have you ever found yourself holding back from raising an issue because you feared it would spark a heated argument or hurt someone's feelings? Well, you're far from alone. For many, the very thought of confrontation triggers a wave of anxiety so strong it feels almost unbearable. And yet, avoiding these difficult conversations often leads to bigger problems down the road. Ones that quietly undermine trust, cause misunderstandings, and can create tension that's hard to shake. Confrontation taps into something primal inside us. When you imagine bringing up a tough topic, your body might react before your mind even catches up. And what do I mean by that? Well, your heart can race, your palms can feel sweaty, and your stomach knots. Well, this is the classic fight or flight response. It's an ancient survival mechanism that kicks in whenever your brain senses danger. But here's the catch. While your body reacts as if you're facing a predator, the threat, it's often just a conversation. The disconnect between your physiological alarm and the actual situation, well, it can make confrontation feel overwhelming, even when it's necessary. Our brain has this ability to turn paper tigers into tigers, to turn perceived threats into real threats. Understanding why confrontation triggers such strong reactions and learning how to navigate these feelings, well, it can transform those dreaded moments into opportunities for connection and growth. So why does confrontation feel so scary? Our minds are quick to imagine the worst. Before you've even spoken, you might be picturing shouting matches, slammed doors, or relationships that fracture beyond repair. Now, this tendency is known as catastrophizing. It traps many of us, traps many people in a cycle of avoidance. On top of that, some fear that raising an issue will make them seem difficult, selfish, or unlikable. Now, these worries are deeply human. Everyone wants to be accepted, and most of us want to avoid conflict. But here's the inconvenient truth. Sweeping problems under the rug rarely makes them disappear. Left unresolved, well, disagreements often fester. Resentment quietly builds. What was once a minor annoyance can grow into a full-blown rupture, whether at home, among friends, or in the workplace. So while confrontation may feel like a risk, avoiding it can carry an even greater cost. Usually the first tough conversation, well, that's with yourself. Before you can engage in a difficult conversation with someone else, you often need to wrestle with your own fears. Now, this internal dialogue is where many battles are won or lost. Now, picture this. You've noticed a colleague consistently missing deadlines, but you've hesitated to say anything. In your mind, you've already rehearsed a scene where they get defensive or angry, and the entire team suffers as a result. This internal confrontation can be exhausting, and it's easy to convince yourself that silence is safer. But what if you shifted your perspective? So instead of thinking, I have to confront them about being late, try reframing it as, I want to talk about how we can support each other in meeting deadlines. So suddenly, the conversation feels less like a battle and more like a collaboration. This mental pivot, this reframe, this reattribution from confrontation to connection, well, it can ease anxiety and prepare you to speak with more confidence. So let's take a moment and illustrate this with a real-life example. Now, this power of speaking up calmly is illustrated in a story about a family dinner. One family was divided over whether to eat out or stay in. A friend of the family chose silence to avoid an argument. But when her brother later discovered she had known about the disagreement and said nothing, well, he felt hurt and betrayed. What seemed like a small act of keeping the peace, well, it ended up causing a bigger rift. Now, this story shows how avoiding confrontation to dodge conflict, Well, how it can sometimes ignite it instead. Now, had the friend simply voiced their thoughts in a respectful way, well, the family might have found common ground without the tension. Now, many of us associate confrontation as being destructive to relationships, but confrontation can be constructive. It's crucial to recognize that confrontation isn't inherently bad. In fact, when handled well, it's an essential tool for building trust, clarifying misunderstandings, and strengthening relationships. Think of confrontation as a skill, like learning to drive or cook or bouncing a basketball. At first, it feels awkward and nerve-wracking, but with practice, it becomes a way to navigate life's bumps more smoothly. Now, there are two broad types of conflict: constructive and destructive. Constructive conflict is about addressing issues calmly and respectively, focusing on the problem, not the person. Destructive conflict, on the other hand, well, it involves blame and yelling or personal attacks, which can do significant damage to relationships. So your goal? Well, it's about engaging in constructive confrontation that moves the conversation forward without escalating tension. So this begs the question, how do we make tough conversations easier? Now, I've been working as a sparring partner for the last 25 years, and although I work with leadership, at the end of the day, it's about building relationships. And with every relationship, as you all well know, conflict and confrontation are a natural part of any relationship. So what I'd like to do now is share some practical strategies to help you navigate confrontation with less fear and more effectiveness. So first off, use I statements. Start by expressing your feelings rather than pointing fingers. For instance, instead of "you're always late," say, "when meetings start late, I feel stressed because it throws off my schedule." This approach lowers defenses and invites dialogue. The second tip is about practicing active listening and empathy. So when the other person speaks, really listen. Just don't wait for your turn to talk. Reflect back what you hear. For example, it sounds like you're frustrated because ... And also ask open-ended questions. Can you help me understand that better? This shows you value their perspective. So a tip that I use a lot is that I do what's a technique called echoing. So if someone says to me, "It's been frustrating working on this project," and then I will echo those same words in my head. This way, I'm not thinking about a rebuttal. Since the brain can only focus on one thing at a time, but what I'm hearing that statement twice in my head. This allows me to listen at a deeper level. Now, a third tip is to create a safe space. Your tone and body language speak volumes. Keep your voice calm and keep it steady. Maintain open posture. Avoid crossed arms or glaring at people. Choose a time and a place when you both feel comfortable and won't be interrupted. Timing here is crucial. Having tough conversations on an empty stomach or at the end of a long, hard day, that isn't a good time. It's best to find a time, especially in the morning when you're both well rested, you've had breakfast, you've had coffee, and it may be the first meeting of the day. If possible, that will be one of the better times to have tough confrontations or conversations. A fourth tip is to manage your emotions. It's easy to get swept up in the heat of the moment. Before and during the conversation, take slow, deep breaths to stay grounded. Remind yourself of your intention to understand and solve, not to win. Another tip is to recognize and respect differences. Some people are naturally more direct or indirect in their communication. Cultural backgrounds and personality types also play a huge role. Being mindful of these differences can help you tailor your approach and reduce misunderstandings. A final tip: set boundaries and know when to pause. If the conversation becomes too tense, you know what? It's okay to suggest taking a break. You might say something along the lines, "You know what? I think we're both feeling upset. Let's revisit this when we're calmer." So often I'm asked about how do I handle defensive or withdrawn reactions. So what if, despite your best efforts, the person you're talking to becomes defensive, they shut down or simply stop engaging, well, this is a common and understandable reaction. Conversations about difficult topics can trigger strong emotions, and people often protect themselves by putting up walls or withdrawing. When this happens, it's important not to take the reaction personally or escalate with blame, frustration, or impatience. Instead, try to remain calm and grounded. You might say something like, "I can see this is really hard to talk about, and I appreciate you listening so far." Acknowledging their feelings can help diffuse tension and show that you're coming from a place of understanding rather than confrontation. Sometimes the best choice is to give them space. This doesn't mean shutting down communication altogether, but rather pausing the conversation so both of you can reflect and cool down. You could suggest something along the lines of, "Maybe we both need some time to think about this. Let's revisit it when we're both feeling more ready." This approach respects their emotional boundaries while keeping the door open for future dialogue. In the meantime, consider what might be underlying their defensiveness. Are they feeling unheard, feeling judged, or vulnerable? If so, gentle reassurance and demonstrating your willingness to listen can gradually help them lower their guard. Remember, patience and empathy often create the conditions necessary for deeper, more honest conversations down the line. In essence, these are key diplomatic skills. Another challenge that comes up quite often in my coaching conversations is, how do I deal with people I don't like? Confrontation is tricky enough on its own, but it becomes even more challenging when you have to address issues with someone you don't particularly like, or even actively dislike. Maybe their style rubs you the wrong way, or past experiences have created friction between you and them. Still, if you need their cooperation or buy-in, it's essential to approach the conversation strategically. So the first step is to focus sharply on shared goals. Regardless of personal feelings, identify the outcome you both want to achieve. By keeping the spotlight on the mutual objective, whether it's the success of a project, the well-being of a team, or another concrete result, you create purpose beyond personal differences. And from experience, this can help keep the conversation constructive and goal-oriented. The next step? Well, it's about being deliberate about sticking to the facts and the issues at hand. It's about avoiding making it personal or bringing up past grievances. I know how easy that is, especially when we're emotionally engaged, but that's why self-awareness is so important. So instead, use clear, objective language about what needs to happen and why. Present your points with logic and respect. And this reduces the chances that the discussion will devolve into a personality clash, and instead keeps it focused on problem solving. And at the same time, don't underestimate the power of acknowledging their value. Even if you don't see eye to eye, showing that you respect their expertise or input, well, it can make them more receptive. For instance, you might say something along the lines, "You know what? Your knowledge in this area is really important to the project's success." This can soften resistance and open space for collaboration. And a final step, recognize when the situation is too difficult to handle alone. If attempts at direct conversation repeatedly break down or escalate, it's wise to bring in a third neutral party. This could be a manager, a project lead, a professional mediator. Because this third person, they can facilitate the conversation. They can help keep things on track and help both sides feel heard and respected. And it goes a long way to preventing personal animosity from blocking progress. Some conflicts are deep-rooted or emotionally charged and may require outside support. So if you find yourself stuck in repeated arguments or feeling emotionally drained, a therapist, a coach, or a mediator can offer valuable tools and perspective. Just some final thoughts before we wrap up this episode. Feeling scared of confrontation is totally natural, but it doesn't have to hold you back. Like any skill, the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. So the idea is this: start small. Next time a tricky topic arises, try using an I statement or practicing active listening. Over time, you'll build the confidence to tackle even the toughest conversations. And the relationships you care about, well, they'll thank you for it. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. And I'll be back next week with my long-form conversational episodes on Monday and the latest bite-sized episode on Friday. And have yourself a relaxing and rejuvenating weekend.